Please rise. And now to honor America, please join in the singing of our national anthem. Representing the three-time Stanley Cup champion New Jersey Devils, Arlette.
I feel like I'm at a game. Oh my gosh. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Controlling, the net is empty, he throws it down, and in! He scored a goal! Martin Brodeur! Sets it up. Double team, they score! The crash line, Michael, forechecking. Randy McKay in overtime, seemingly harmless, but with the crashers out there, you never know. Out in front and a shot, bounced off Brodeur, scramble, and the Devils are up with it. Back ahead now, it is nudged by Marshall ahead to Elias. He moves in. Elias crosses and shoots one. It went wide. Chopped at by Gomez. Loose puck to the back. Colin White kept it. Swung it across to Niedermeyer. Niedermeyer holds. Shoots one. And it's knocked down. Scramble. Score! Marshall! In overtime! The Devils win it! Oh, baby! Brad Marshall. Championship to New Jersey. The Devils win the Stanley Cup. Out on to Kovalchuk, and Kovalchuk a shot that's carefully played away by Lundqvist. Now Ponikarovsky with it. Through one in front, block there. Scramble for it there. They poke away at it. Still it's loose. Poked out by Kovalchuk. They score! Emrick! It's over!
Happy Devils! Michael, Doc, Emrick, Sunday! This is the Let's Go Devils podcast, season 2, episode 9. The original voice of the New Jersey Devils. You just can't help it but get all fired up for this podcast because tonight we have Michael Doc Emrick on our very own Let's Go Devils podcast. This is just simply amazing. It's an honor, and I am all fired up. We've been fired up for a while. We knew about this about 3 to 4 weeks ago, and we're just ecstatic. Right now, you can watch us on our Facebook page, on Facebook Live at Let's Go Devils Podcast. Share the link. Share and like the link. On Twitter and Periscope at Let's Go Devils Pod. Again, at Let's Go Devils Pod. Reason why it's just pod, 15 characters or less. If you got a problem with it, just tweet to at Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, and tell them that Sam Wu sent you, and we need the extra 4 characters so we can put the cast at the end of Let's Go Devils Pod. Our YouTube channel. We've got a YouTube channel. Subscribe / Let's Go Devils. That's our YouTube channel. And we are on Twitch. What the heck is Twitch? It's some kind of gaming thing. Well, it's finally relevant. We are on Twitch because we got Doc Emrick, and he's on NHL 19. So there, we connected the dots. We are on Twitch, and we probably only have about five followers. But also, you can also stream us live audio. I know Organist Pete right now is driving, so he's going to go to letsgodevils.com and live stream the show in his car, Bluetoothing it in because it's safe. And also, safe, you can catch us. Yeah, and also catch us after the show on iTunes, on the iHeart app, and Spotify. Guys, I'm going to just set up Doc Emrick in a few minutes, but I'm going to turn over the podcast over to Shorts Guy and Beer Baron. Here you go.
Dude, I don't even know what to say. That was really tough to follow. Thank you, Sam. First of all those calls that we're listening to as the show is introing, I don't know about you, but dude, I was getting like the chills. I was like sitting here, goosebumps, every single one of them. This is, I can't believe it. I'm pretty excited.
As much as I love the Henrique It's Over, that call for the first Stanley Cup is still my favorite. That's still my favorite. Especially because I didn't hear it on TV because I was there. I didn't have to hear it on TV. So yeah, but it's still great. It's like it was the high point of my my middle school years at that point. So I mean, obviously it's still the high point of one of the high points of my life. But at the time, it's like the middle school me is at Game 4. It's like I lost my mind.
Oh my God. So all right, before we get to Doc, before we get to probably one of the most incredible things that that we've ever done in our lives, which is talk to a legend. Let's talk a little bit about the current status of the team, which unfortunately over the last 7 has not looked too good.
Not good. No, three losses all this week. Lost to last night I didn't get a chance to watch. I was out last night, so but getting shut out by the Islanders, is just not cool. Detroit 3-4, but the Tampa loss stung because that was just so hard.
Well, a couple of things.
They're one of the top teams. I get it, but still.
Yeah, I mean they are one of the top teams and they're super deep. I mean their power plays. It's one of the most frightening things you'll ever see. When you have Kucherov and
we gave him so many opportunities.
Yeah, well, that's been the Devils' MO this year is how many penalties can we take in a game? Honestly, one of the things that was disappointing was they come off of that loss to Tampa Bay, and a lot of people were saying that their effort in the Detroit game was lackluster. Detroit's not really blowing the doors off of anybody, and the Devils walked into that building. You were hoping to see that they would have this urgency about them, and it kind of fell flat. And that 4-3 score was not really indicative of how the game went, and it just
recently, in the beginning of the season, it seemed like the Devils were getting all the bounces. It seemed like everything was going their way. And recently, it kind of just feels the opposite. And, the empty net goal in Detroit, when the Devils are on a power play, kind of sum that up. They're looking to tie the game late, and they clear the puck.
Awful bounce.
Oh, terrible. And then they come out against the Islanders, and at points in the Islander game, they were dominating the play. They were in the offensive zone. They were moving the puck well. Things were going seemed relatively well. And they just couldn't connect. They couldn't find, that final piece of scoring a goal. A lot of people, Taylor Hall after the game said, I rather play, I'm not going to say exactly what he said, but he said, it's worse to win a game and play like whatever than it is to lose a game like this. So, the message in the locker room seems like, hey, look, we didn't win, but we're going in the right direction. And you see like Zacha getting sent down. That's got to send a message to him and to the rest of the team. So hopefully they're going to start to turn things around here. Yeah,
and when I saw that Zacha send down, I was like, oh man, they're really trying to get him going, because he can't score. He can't pay for a goal this year.
That poor kid.
It's been so tough. He's missed nets. He's missed solid opportunities. He just can't do it. So when I saw they sent him down, it's like, oh man, that's they're really pushing him down. They really want to get him going.
Yeah, which is a good thing. Maybe this lights a fire under his butt, and he comes back and he's playing better than he was when he was up with the big club. I'll tell you who's playing pretty well as of late down in the old Binger. Mikey McLeod. Mikey McLeod. Mikey McLeod's
been, what?
So maybe he's on the radar to get called up next.
Hey, I'll tell you what, with the current form the Devils are in, it's why not try different guys out, see if you can find something that works. Find someone to maybe you get someone to insert into the lineup that'll just completely spin it around and get it going again.
Yeah. It's true.
But then this week brought back the age-old question: who should we have in net, Corey or Keith?
Mm-hmm.
So that debate still rages on. I mean, it's tough to go in for your first game against a team that's just scoring in bunches like Tampa Bay. We were close on against Detroit. Kincaid gets the nod again against the Islanders, and it's like we haven't won with any of them recently, so the job's wide open as far as I'm concerned. The job's wide open until one of them steals a win.
Marty can come down from the office and jump in there. No, honestly,
but serious question though. Serious question: is Marty this year's e-bug? Because they did not have any e-bug tryouts this year. Does Marty be the e-bug?
I mean, how sweet would that be? I don't wish anything ill on either Keith or Corey, but that would be pretty epic to see that happen. But honestly, the game against Detroit, some of the Corey didn't have a bad game. There was and neither did Keith in that against the Islanders. It just seems like defensively we're leaving guys pretty much uncontested standing in front of the net, and they're making this initial save, and then the puck is just kind of sitting there, which I understand. Like, you're hoping for the puck to get kicked out or to be, pushed at least out of the crease. But at the same time, you have a defenseman, Lovejoy, for example, had Eberle like basically sitting in his lap, and it almost looked like he wasn't able to like tie him up, and Eberle knocks that goal in. And then in Detroit, you had Butcher sitting there and he got beat. And I'm not going to lie. I don't know if the injury that he sustained earlier in the year is affecting him, but Butcher doesn't seem right. Maybe that's just me.
He doesn't seem right.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I was hoping maybe it wasn't just me just overanalyzing it, but it seems like Butcher is just a little off. And, he's had a couple of pucks, jump over his stick. He's let up some plays in front of the net. So you're hoping that he gets back to form. Maybe he's hiding the fact that he's a little bit more hurt than he actually is, or, alluding to. So I don't know. They have a lot of things they need to clean up before to continue this road trip.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, they're only home 4 times this month. At least you would assume that they get to sleep in their own beds, after playing the Islanders last night. I'm looking at the schedule now to see where we go next. So last night we played the Islanders with Pittsburgh. Okay, so you got to assume that
so that's not good either.
Yeah, but then from Pittsburgh to Ottawa. So I'm assuming it as much of a long stretch as this is. I'm curious if they're going to be going up and down, or if they're going to be like going from Ottawa to Toronto. But a road stretch like this could be as grueling as it may be. It could also turn out to be a positive because you get all the guys together, especially if you're going to stay on the road for, like, let's say this week. So maybe they go to Pittsburgh either tonight or tomorrow. They're on the road all this week away from home until next Sunday, which we're at Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a team bonding. It could be right at the right time for them, to be on the road, to grow as a team, to come together. So it could be a positive to be on the road at this point in the year. We won't know until this week. I just hope they just have to turn it around.
Yeah. And
we've yet to win on the road, and we're on the road all month.
Yeah, exactly. And John in our Facebook group, he asked, do you think that Ray Shero is going to make any trades? And I'm sorry if I messed up your name, by the way. With the whole William Nylander, that whole situation in Toronto, it would be nice to think that, he could go into Toronto and Ray could just be like, here, I'll give you this, this, and this. I love when people are like, just give him Pavel Zacha in a first-round pick. And I'm like, I don't know if it'd really work out that way. But, I mean, it would be nice to bring in some extra scoring. Money. Oh, of course, yeah. It would be nice to see him bring in some extra scoring because it seems like if you shut down our first line, our secondary scoring is not really there at the moment.
No, it's not. It's quiet. It's there is no secondary scoring. We'll put it that way. It's upsetting, but you know what? It's still early in the season, which is a positive. That's the only positive I can come on right now is it's still early in the season. Sam, you're back. Sam, microphone.
Yeah, I know. Rookie mistake, right? Oh, guys. Well, this is definitely a treat and an honor. But honestly, when we first started this podcast last season, we couldn't have imagined that we would have had the opportunity to talk to the likes of two-time Stanley Cup champions, an Isabel Cup champion, former NHL players, reporters, devoted Devils fans, and Kurt Devils play-by-play broadcasters like Matt Loughlin and Steve Cangelosi. But guys, tonight our guest tonight started his career with the New Jersey Devils in 1982, his broadcasting career, and then became first an original voice of the New Jersey Devils. He left in 1986, but came back in 93 and has called many memorable Devils games that we have enjoyed over the years, including the Devils' 95 Stanley Cup win, Martin Brodeur scoring his first ever goal against the Montreal Canadiens in the 97 playoffs, and obviously the Adam Henrique scoring the game-winning goal against the New York Rangers in 2012 Eastern Conference Finals. Right now on the Nova Product Design Hotline, we say hello to a dear old friend, Michael Doc Emrick. Doc, you're here with Sam, Scott, and John. Welcome, and thank you for coming on to the Let's Go Devils podcast.
Hey, it's good to talk to the three of you guys all in one place. And I heard some agonizing about Pavel being in Binghamton and what might be accomplished. How did he do, by the way, over the weekend? Has anyone heard yet how his American League stint went?
I believe he had one assist.
Oh, okay. Well, I know it was empty and 10 to start off with, and that's discouraging for sure. But at any rate, this is not about discouragement, and I know the basis on which you founded this enterprise, and I think it's wonderful. The glass of water is half full, even when sometimes it seems like it's not. And this is the same team that started out winning 4 straight when nobody else in the league had. And with 4 games on the road this week, we trust that they aren't going to have this empty string of no points on the road, and the last team that's looking for a point on the road before this week is out. They're in Pittsburgh tonight, waiting up for the Penguins for tomorrow night's game, and so that'll be interesting. They've had some good vibes in Pittsburgh in their history, that's for sure.
Doc, speaking of half glass full, when you came back to the Devils in '93, what people may not know, it's because you had the misfortune of not having your broadcast contract renewed with the Philadelphia Flyers. It was at that time, coincidentally, Martin Brodeur started his first full rookie season. Now you had the great fortune of covering his career right from the start when he won the Calder Trophy as a Rookie of the Year in '93 and '94. And now in a week from now, Marty will be inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. Doc, at what point in his career did you realize that he was special and had potential of being one of the greatest goaltenders of all time with the likes of Terry Sawchuk, Bernie Perrott, Ken Dryden, and Jacques Plante?
I don't know if I would have had the foresight and the brilliance to put him in that category by the end of his first year, and that remarkable first season that he had, and the Devils playoff run that wound up going into quadruple overtime against Dominik Hasek and the Buffalo Sabres in Game 6, and then eventually winning Game 7 and shutting down Dale Hawerchuk in the final seconds of the 7th game, and then going on to that Herculean playoff against the eventual champion Rangers that year. But he had made his mark pretty strongly that season. And then the next year, 94-95, I think you started to see that this was a guy that could become one of the greats. What could put him up in the ranks of those all-time greats are probably when the wins and the shutouts started to climb. That was probably when we started to think in terms of him being the immediate Hall of Famer that he became. But I think we got some real clues in that first season. And I arrived and I was riding the coattails of what turned out to be a magical time in Devils history. Jacques Lemaire arrived and Larry Robinson arrived, and on the third day of training camp in the fall of 1993, I sat next to Ken Daneyko in the dressing room, and he said, "I've learned more about playing defense in the first 3 days of training camp than I have learned in all of my professional and junior life." And at that time, Ken Daneyko wasn't a real young guy, but he was one of the guys in the fall of '83 that we did a feature on because he was a rookie. And so now we're in the fall of '93, and he's a 10-year vet, and he's telling me about all of this magical thing that has happened in just a short period of time working with Jacques Lemaire and Larry Robinson. Well, the whole collective turned out to be magical because here was this kid Brodeur who was linking up with Chris Terreri, who had been this established goaltender that the Devils had. And I wasn't used to winning a lot in Philadelphia. The 5 years that I was there, they made the playoffs only one time. And here were the Devils under this new coach, Jacques Lemaire, and alternating goaltenders, not perfect alternating, but they were splitting the load. And that year, I think Marty played 3 more games than Terreri did. But they were splitting the load, and the Devils won the first 7 games right out of the blocks. Well, I realized that I was lucky and star-crossed to be where I was at that time, to be resuming my career with Madison Square Garden Network, which at that time wasn't MSG, it was Sports Channel, and then they eventually amalgamated with MSG to become what we know today. But it was a marvelous time, and in a long-winded answer to your question, it was not immediate, but it became pretty apparent, I think, down that stretch of the first playoff year, and then in the second year when it turned out to be a magical run for the Devils in the playoffs. Although, if you'll allow me to tell a story from that home stretch of the regular season.
Right ahead.
Devils showed no indication of being a championship team. It was a lockout year, I realized, and that's been much ballyhooed. And we resumed in January and went into Hartford for the first game, and it wound up being an overtime tie because we had those back then. there was no indication this was going to be anything special, that maybe this was a carryover of last year. They had that great series against the Rangers, and maybe they were going to be okay, but maybe they weren't. And so down the home stretch, they won 3 of the last 7 games, and I'll never forget the last game was at the Odd in Buffalo, where they had been so dynamic in the previous playoff, and Marty got pulled in the middle of that game, and they lost it to Buffalo. And this did not look like a team that was on its way to a championship. As a matter of fact, they finished the regular season with a winning percentage that was the lowest in the modern era, of 542 was their regular season winning percentage. So they were not shooting anybody's lights out or startling anybody with how they were. But boy, once the playoffs started, they went into Boston, and unlike the previous year when Chris Terreri, who had all of the magic at Boston Garden, won 3 games out of the series with the Bruins. He won the 3 games. It started the 3 games at Boston Garden, won them all. But by now, it was Marty's net. And Chris only played 15 games that entire regular season. And he had only won 3, and it was largely Marty's net. And so Marty was the guy that played in Boston. Shut him out the first 2 games right in Boston. And this was going to be something that was quite magical. And as it turned out, the sweep of Detroit was probably one of the biggest surprises, I think, to the hockey world. They had played Detroit all year, and Detroit hadn't seen them. And by the time they saw them and they saw what they were up against, it was too late.
Doc, this is John. That was an awesome story. First off, thanks for coming on tonight. And my question for you is going to be, what was it like calling that Game 4? I will admit I did not hear it because I was in the building with you. The 7th grade version of me was losing his mind watching the Devils win.
And I think by the time, you'll recall that Detroit actually took a lead in that game before the Devils came back, and Sean Chambers had that slap shot goal that pretty well started the celebration going. But I think probably the most vivid memory that I have of that home stretch, and especially when Sean scored, and it made it very apparent that this was going to be a championship and it was going to be a sweep, was Mike Peluso, who was part of the crash line with Bobby Holik and Randy McKay. Our cameras for Fox, because John Davidson and I were doing the game nationally for Fox, and that was the only lucky break that I got that enabled me to actually call the cup-clinching game of the team that I followed all year, because the whole rules about national television coverage of the finals had changed, and guys that had normally, up until the previous year, had worked right through to the finals doing the games on local television, no longer were allowed to do it, but just by luck, I was able to do the 4th game. And our Fox camera showed Mike at the bench, and he was so overcome by emotion that he was going to win the Stanley Cup. It was apparent by then, and the celebrating in the stands was on, and it was just a matter of grinding out the remaining 5 or 6 minutes. And Mike was crying, and he just was not able to have any other emotion other than tears of happiness that this was coming to him. And John Davidson kept track, and he actually did miss a shift because of his emotions, and we were showing that. And it came right through to the handshake line. As a matter of fact, he was sort of shaking his head and having his hair down in his eyes to block out the fact that he was still crying while he was going through the handshake line. But that was the joy of emotions that I think everyone was feeling. And Claude Lemieux was the MVP of the playoffs, and he was crying as he accepted the Conn Smythe Trophy too. I think those are the things that stand out a lot, are the emotions that players felt. There was the normal joy as they poured off the bench and displaced the net behind Marty Brodeur. But I think it was just the lucky break that I had to be able to share that with the national audience that day, and a vivid memory for myself that I'll never lose.
Doc, I have to say this is Scott. I just have to say that this is beyond an honor. And as John and Sam both said, thank you so much for joining us. My question is,
this is wonderful of you to do, and it makes me feel great to recall these memories with you. You guys sound young, and it was 23 years ago, so I don't know what ages you were at the time that first championship happened.
We were both. I was in middle school. I think John was in middle school. We were both born with the Devils. We were born in '82. So.
Yep.
So
okay. Probably 13.
To have been recognizing all the significance of this to Devils fans then.
Oh, yes. And I have my brother to thank for that, for sure. But my question for you is, through your career, you've called some of the most memorable games for NBC and for the Devils. But for the Devils, what was your most memorable game, or is there any that really stick out? One of our fans, Rob, wanted to ask this question as well. Do you have a game specifically, maybe a special moment for Marty that really stuck out to you?
I would say, no, it was probably more of a team thing, and I guess if Lou Lamoriello was listening to this, he'd probably smile because he would want it to be something that the team was involved in rather than an individual. I think Marty setting the record against Chicago for the most wins would probably stand out in my mind as an individual thing, and him scoring the goal that you referred to against Montreal, because we had kind of anticipated that might happen, and of course the rules are such, and we discussed this with Marty as soon as the trapezoid went in, what are the chances that anybody's going to be able to score a goal anymore? But those would be two that would stand out. And for members of your audience who maybe aren't as old as you are, and you were quite young at the time that Marty broke in, but you were living at the time that he started his career. I think I can do this in about 90 seconds. I went through the NHL guide and record book today and just got the records that he holds as he goes into the Hall of Fame a week from tomorrow. Games played, 1266. He leads Patrick Waugh for second by 237. Minutes played, 74,000 minutes by 14,200 over the number two person, Patrick Waugh. Minutes played in a season, almost 4,700. He leads by 61 minutes over himself the following year. That was the second place. Career wins, 691, over 140 more than Patrick Waugh. Most wins in a season, he shares that with Braden Holtby. Most 30-win seasons, 14 of them. Patrick Waugh had 13. Most consecutive 30-win seasons, 12, by 3 over Patrick Waugh. Most 40-win seasons, 8. 6 others have 3. That's as close as anybody got. Games played in a season, 78. 3 times he had 77. Can you imagine? Appearing in 78 games, and 3 times he had 77. Grant Fuhr with the record, 79. And I remember Mike Keenan was going to play Grant Fuhr every game, and Grant got hurt in Detroit, one of the games that John Davidson and I were doing on Fox in the 78, in the 95-96 season. And he missed a game or maybe 2 in a row after that, or he might have played in all the games that season. But anyway, the other thing that stood out in my mind about all of Marty's resilience was he had 101 appearances against the Rangers and 68 of them in a row. And he had a decisive win-loss record against the Rangers. There was one game at the Meadowlands in 2005 where Scott Clemenson had to step in and play for him because Marty had a knee sprain. And the Rangers won that game in New Jersey. But he had 68 straight starts against the New York Rangers. And as I said, most of those went pretty well. There was a stretch that the Devils had a predominantly winning record against the Rangers over 6 or 7 straight years, and Marty was in goal for all of those. But those are some things that stand out, and it was fun going back and just looking at to see actually how many of those records that he held, that he established, and how many he still has as he goes into the Hall of Fame. it was, I'm sure that the discussion that is held every June up in the Hall of Fame probably didn't take very long once his name was nominated. Been a part of discussions like that. I served on the Hall of Fame committee 15 years, which is the maximum. The terms are 3 years long, and you can be renewed 4 times for a total of 15 years. And there are occasions where we're not allowed to tell you the nature of discussions. That's part of the secrecy of the group. But there are, I can say this, there are players who are nominated about whom the discussion does not last very long. And I would imagine that that was one of them last June.
And Doc, I guarantee there's one stat that you weren't going to find in that book, and that is the amount of players who either turned to or started playing goaltender because of Brodeur, and I am one of them.
That's a very good point.
And every goalie in my league wanted number 30. So that right there, and then funny story, every goalie wanted 30, and myself, I picked 29 because, well, 30 was Brodeur's number. I wanted something different, 29. Found out later on that he started off at number 29 when they called him up in the red and green days. So I got real excited about that one personally.
I remember talking to his brother, one of his 2 brothers. I believe it was Claude. And this was the night of Marty's jersey retirement. And he talked about the night that Marty got in his first game, and he had a hard time on Route 3 because he
haven't we all
Montreal, and he was so worried about being late for the game, and he got lost on Route 3, and you know, if you probably had your parents taking you to those games as children at the Meadowlands, but for somebody who was coming from out of the area and trying to find it and making sure that they took the right exit to get off, you can imagine how difficult that was. And so that was the only panic-stricken thing about the Brodeur family that day, was that in coming down, they had a hard time getting off on the right exit. And I'm not sure that Claude made it in time for the start of the game, but that was the one panic-stricken moment of seeing Marty play.
So, Doc, it's John again. I'm just curious. Listening to your play-by-play, you throw in all of these random words. My personal favorite is when you say that someone shillelagh'd the puck. Do you just have this bank of words that you look to use, or is this all like off the cuff as you're doing the play-by-play? Like a word comes to mind, so you throw it in there. I'm curious of that.
Oh yeah, no, there's nothing that's predetermined about it. Well, when I was years ago, when I was hoping to do this for a living, my ambition began at age 14 when I saw my first game in 1960. But it took a while before I could actually get to do this, and I would go to partly vacated arenas and sit in the corner with a cassette recorder and do the game to myself. And I would talk to other announcers that were in the building that were about to go to work doing the game that I was watching. And one of them, Lyle Stieg, who later got a chance to do the Capitals in Washington for a year, told me that one of the bits of advice he gave me was to try to come up with ways of saying the repetitive things that take place in a hockey game, but to use different words. And he said, if you can come up with different ways to say the same thing, that would help in the variety of your broadcast. And so I took him to heart for that, but I never came up with a 3 or 5 card that had on it or anything like that. I just, that things strike me as it works. One thing is like, Green Acres, where a defenseman will backhand the puck and scoop it up into the air like a pitchfork move in a barnyard. And so pitchfork was always used for that. It wasn't used for anything else. And shillelagh was like highline move or hurling, the old Irish game, where the puck is up high and it is swept sometimes by a goaltender and swept up high out of play. I try not to manufacture things that's just an action that I see goes to the back of my brain and hopefully through the vocal cords and out my mouth. Sometimes, like any science, it's imperfect. And so there are some nights that are better than others, but that's what's behind it. There's nothing conspiratorial about it at all. It's just what I see registers with me. And the variety is only because over 3,600 games and now in my 46th season, you have developed more words for these repetitive actions than I would have had in my third year, let's say.
Doc, this is Scott. Just to kind of play off of what John was saying, another thing that I completely admire, and I think a lot of people do. In fact, Neil in our Facebook group was wondering what kind of advice you would have for a young broadcaster, but your knowledge of not just the game, of all the players and how you retain all this information. Somebody will be on the fourth line and jump out in the ice, and you can talk about, they went to this college and you know all their stats. How do you prepare for that, or how do you remember all these different nuances about every single player, it seems?
Well, the hockey players are the best bunch of people that I've ever been around. And for 46 years, it's pretty much the only bunch of people that I've ever been around. But they're easy to talk to, and especially when it comes to things about their family or about their background, they're very cordial about sharing. And so you know that if you talk to somebody in your daily life and you hear their story, you remember that. One of the things that every network that I've done Olympics for, beginning with CBS and continuing on through Turner and NBC, they've always encouraged us to tell stories that people may take in statistics for about 5 seconds. But a story they'll remember, and sometimes it's a story they'll remember forever. And so those things have always appealed to me because I think people can recall them and understand them, whereas statistics are helpful to trace, somebody's progress. For example, Palmieri coming out of the blocks with that record-setting performance of getting the first goal for his team in 4 straight games. Nobody had ever done that from the start of the season. So that's a statistic that registers with people, resonates, and keeps it going, until somebody else does it. But the stories about individual people, I think that Marty Brodeur sat up in the forum and admired Ron Hextall for the way that he could handle the puck. And at that time, Marty's a little guy, and he's in the forum because his dad was the team photographer, and he got in free because his dad got tickets, and he would carry his dad's equipment, or his brothers would do that, and he got to watch, and he got to watch from up high, and he would park himself behind the net up high in the forum, and he admired Hextall because he saw how well he handled the puck. And Lord only knows, here was this Hextall clone. Maybe not in temperament, quite a bit different than Ron Hextall's temperament, but in his ability to handle the puck. Isn't it interesting? Both of them had 2 goals. Mm. And the ability that he had was honed because he admired what Hextall could do, and he took it on himself. I'll never forget, it was almost invariably Thanksgiving Day. We always wound up playing at America West Arena out in Phoenix against the Coyotes when they played downtown. And Marty was going to play that game that night, and I always went to morning skates for reasons that you very kindly pointed out, because I could be around the guys and I'd learn something more about an individual player that I might be able to work into the broadcast. And I watched Marty in street clothes. He didn't go out and take shots that day. I watched him in street clothes stand on the end line near one net, lofting pucks with his goalie stick, and they landed either at the other goal line, that's about 180 feet, or in front of the goal at the other end. So even in street clothes, he was parked at the side of the net just for fun, lofting pucks, and he had the ability in civilian clothes without equipment, just holding a goal stick in his bare hands, to loft a puck that high and that far. And so those are things that, we didn't have a camera there to record it, but I could certainly tell people that were watching the telecast about what I saw that morning.
Doc, this is Sam. Changing gears, I want to go back in time in the early days when you started your broadcasting career. LaFountain, Indiana. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Fort Wayne Comets.
Sure. You did great.
Family. Oh, thank you. Family trip to the hockey game. You fell in love with the sport. You wanted to become an NHL broadcaster. You went on to Manchester University for your undergrad, Miami University for your master's, and went to Bowling Green to obtain your PhD in communications, radio, TV, film. My question to you is, did you go through all this schooling and pursuing your dream as a broadcaster, or was this a plan B in case broadcasting did not work out for what, you had these degrees to fall back on while following your passion?
I'll try to shorten my answers because I realize I've been really long-winded tonight. It's plan B all the way. What I wanted to do in the worst way was to broadcast hockey. And when I went to Manchester, it was close to Fort Wayne. It was 40 miles from Fort Wayne. That was my favorite team, still is to this day, the Fort Wayne Comets. They're now in the ECHL. And on Wednesday nights, they didn't sell out. So I could go to an empty section and sit in the corner and record games. That was what I really wanted to do. After I had finished Manchester, I had no experience in television whatsoever, and Miami University offered assistantships where you would teach a class and they would give you free tuition in a one-year master's program. And I thought, well, this would give me a chance to learn TV. And Miami University was close to Dayton. And Dayton had a team in the same league as Fort Wayne. And so when I went to Miami University, they needed a sports director for the station. So I had a credential from the university that said that I worked for the university station. I drove to every Dayton Gems game that I could get to, got access to the press box because I had a credential, and got to talk to all these people like Lyle Stieg, the Dayton Gems announcer, who gave me that advice about picking up my words. After I'd finished the Masters, I needed a job. I sent all these tapes and letters out to all the minor league teams. I got all these fancy rejection letters back because there were no emails at the time. I needed a job, and there was a small college in western Pennsylvania that needed somebody to teach speech and broadcasting. So, having nothing else to do, I took that job, and it was about 35 miles from Pittsburgh. So I went there, and after teaching for 2 years, and the second year, I went to the editor of the nearby evening daily newspaper and said, Penguins are 35 miles away. I'll cover the Penguins' home games and write up the stories for free if you get me a pass. The editor said, good deal to me. So I got my foot in the door of the NHL. I was a bona fide member of the NHL Writers Association, even though I didn't. It gave me a chance to do that. So now I was teaching school for 2 years and realized maybe hockey isn't going to work out, sadly. I better get the advanced education because I'll make $600 a year more teaching college if I have the doctoral degree. So I applied at 2 schools that had doctoral programs where they also had campus stations that carried the hockey games of the university, Michigan and Bowling Green. And when I went to visit Bowling Green, the staff member that did the first and third period said, the student that did the second period graduated. If you come here, you can do the second period of our home games. And so here was an offer not only to get my education continued, but I could get on the air and actually do a game to somebody other than myself. So after 2 years of coursework at Bowling Green and 18 periods a year for 2 seasons, I had a bona fide air check, and I sent those out with letters to every team, and one of them in Port Huron, Michigan called, and that was 46 years ago. So that's the story on how it finally happened, but it was a plan B all the way.
Now, Doc, you have kept a binder of all these rejection letters from executives at the time, rejecting you as a broadcaster. And I truly believe, Doc, that great success comes from a mountain of failures and rejections. Why did you keep it? Is it something of motivation, or is it a friendly reminder of how far you've come in your career?
It's motivation, I think, and it's also, I like to show it to other people because you had asked me earlier, one of you had asked me earlier, and I, in going around about in a story, I failed to actually answer the question, what was the advice I would give to prospective broadcasters? And the answer is don't quit. And the reason that I kept those letters, and I didn't realize at the time the reason that I did, is that I will show it to college classes and say, look at this, this is rejection. And there's going to be that in life, especially if you choose broadcasting or if you choose anything that a lot of people want the jobs of, only a few are chosen. You're going to be turned down a number of times, but you're only going for one yes. You might get 50 no's, but if you get one yes, that's all you need to get started. And the first job is always the hardest one to get. And so that's the reason. I didn't know at the time that was the reason I kept them, but the reason I kept them is I can show them to other people as an example of how it might go for them, but don't get discouraged. So the advice to anyone wanting to get into this business is don't quit. And I annually get a chance to listen to audition CDs, audition DVDs of prospective broadcasters, no charge. I enjoy listening to it, and I am proud to say that there are 3 guys in the NHL, and I got a chance to listen to their CDs, and I still have them from 10 to 15 years ago because they sent them to me, and I didn't work any magic in their lives. I gave them a few suggestions, but they had to have the tools to work with to make this go. And I'm so proud to see that they made a go of it, and now they're at the place that they really wanted to be in life, and that's broadcasting in the NHL.
Bill, we actually have a mutual friend, Bill Clement. He said to me once that you have had a major influence in his broadcasting career, and
worked with, and also one of the funniest.
Yeah, definitely. He told me a story about you explained to him that it is easier for the listener to frame a play, a description, if it is stated in past tense as opposed to present tense, especially on radio. Can you elaborate how you came up with this? Is this something you discovered during your PhD dissertation, or was it one of your mentors that you taught you this? Because I never realized it.
He thought of it himself, and he thought that I did. Bill is one of the brightest people I've ever worked with. He and I used to go through our own training camp when we worked together in Philadelphia. We would hold a training camp at Bill's house and practice doing interviews. And it's just like any other skill. And his thought was, this is just like the skill that the players have, and we've had a long summer off. We should practice this, and so that's what we would do. Perhaps it is because, in essence, when you're describing a game on radio, what your eye has seen has, in a split second, already passed by the time you have framed the words and the voice has gotten to the listener, and the listener has gotten the words into his ear and then into his brain and absorbed it. This may take a moment, but one of the more important things that I ever did, I was advised to get voice lessons. And I went to a very bright woman in New York named Lillian Wilder. She had worked with Charles Osgood, Oprah Winfrey, George Bush the Elder. There's a 40 number after him, and I've lost track of my presidents, I guess. He was the first of the George Bushes to be president. And anyway, I at that time was doing radio with Sal Messina of the New York Rangers games. And so she said, when you come for your first lesson, bring a sample of your work. And I had it on what was then cassette tape. Your younger listeners won't even know what that is. They measured about 2 by 3.5 inches roughly, and it was magnetic tape that would go around in a circle, and so I brought that and brought a cassette machine, and so she started play, and I thought I had a pretty good description of 30 to 35 seconds of action in one of the Rangers broadcasts that I had done. And there was a loud click of the stop button in her studio, and she turned to me and she said, "Well, you got it all in, didn't you?" I was spitting out words at a machine gun's pace because it was radio. That's all I'd ever known. As long as you get in all the words, it's up to the listener to decipher it. And she explained to me that's not how it works. The human ear and the human brain can only take in so many words. And I was using way too many words for my radio broadcast. And I had to cut the words back because it would result in overload on the listener's part, and it would also wind up in probably having radios turned off. And so that was one of many things that I learned from Lillian Wilder. And coincidentally, I started to have more opportunities to do more work after I'd had some lessons with her. So another sidebar story to all of that.
Hey, Doc. This is Scott again. Sorry. I just had a quick question, actually a two-part question, if you wouldn't mind. The first is for my brother, and I promised him I'd ask him or ask the question. I know Bob Shepard, the great announcer for the New York Yankees, used to love saying Don Mattingly or Mickey Mantle. Is there any name? Is there any name that you had or have that you just love to say? Is there any name that you really like to say? And the other question would be, if you remember a game against Pittsburgh, there was a crazy fan that was wearing Martin Brodeur gear and standing behind the bench, if I remember correctly. If you remember that game.
There have been some crazy fans in a lot of towns, and there's something that strikes me familiar about that, but I would have to see video to be reminded completely about it. Yeah, it seems like there was a Brodeur look-alike at the old years ago, but I can't remember a lot about it. So, the first question again.
The first question is: do you have any names of any players that you particularly like to say?
No, I really want to get. I'm more concerned about being accurate with names and saying them the way the player wants them said. And every once in a while, we will get a total reversal. John Tavares this year startled us when this fall in training camp, his uncle in the National Lacrosse League, we had been saying Tavares whenever we described lacrosse. And I had a couple of lacrosse games involving John. And I was shocked when he came into the New York Islanders camp the first year, and we were told it was Tavares. And then all of a sudden this year, it becomes Tavares, apparently something that he had asked about. So somewhere along the line, we were misinformed as to how he wanted it said, or he made a change, as players often do. But there's probably not one that I really enjoy saying. There have been several over the years that, really do have a ring, like Sergei Krasov, who played for the Chicago Blackhawks at one time. There was one that Bill Clement actually solved a problem that I had, and it was of all people, Sergei Nemchinov. I had a problem of saying Nemchimov. It would come out Nemchimov, M-O-V, and he noticed it and I noticed it, and I said, I don't know why I can't. It's a mental block. He said, how about you drop out? Just practice dropping off the middle syllable and say Nemnov, Nemnov, Nemnov. So I did a few times to him, and he said, it's easy, isn't it? I said, yeah. And he said, okay, now put the middle syllable back and say Nemchinov. And it worked. So Bill was a genius at stuff like that. But that was one of the one of the harder names that I had to save, and yet it was only 3 syllables. You'd think that it would have been a trickier name than that, but that was one that seemed to somehow or other lodge in my mind and give me a lot of problems. But there have been so many wonderful names. I had a chance to do water polo in 2004 and in 2012 at the Olympics, thanks to NBC. And in 2004, the water polo was held the first week indoors when it was 100 degrees outside, and the second week outdoors. And it was in Greece, and so Greece automatically had a team. And there were several names on the Greek national team that were, if you included the first name, 8 or 9 syllables. And the ball got moved around pretty fast, and it was not, in answer to your question, those were not names that I enjoyed saying, but it was a challenge to say them, especially as the ball moved around pretty fast. And there were times that I just let the viewer watch it, and then if it looked like a good scoring play, I would name the player who had the ball, because the names were rather long and you couldn't get them out fast enough.
Doc, it's John. My final question for you is your call with Emrick's goal in Game 6. Your excitement in that call was probably maxed by all of ours in the building. Am I correct that it was pure excitement to see that goal go in against the Rangers?
Yeah, it was excitement, and it was also it's over is one of those calls that I use a lot in overtime games. And so that wasn't necessarily unique to the fact that it was the Devils defeating the Rangers. I believe I used it on Sidney Crosby's overtime winner in the gold medal game in Vancouver. So that's a common call of mine, and it was an exciting finish, and it was significant in Devils history. They did have a sweep of the Rangers at an earlier time, but it's over, probably registered with Devils fans in a different way because of all the difficulties they had with the Rangers in some of the playoff years. But lost in that also was the sweep that they engineered in an earlier series. Remember, Jaromir Jagr was playing for the Rangers, and on that deciding day of the sweep, he shouldn't have been playing. He had a bad shoulder, and he got hurt, I believe, in the first period. On a fairly light hit, he got put out for the rest of the game, and it was one of those dominant performances by the Devils and by Marty Brodeur. But engineering the sweep in games 3 and 4 at Madison Square Garden, I think, was probably memorable to a lot of Devils fans. But yeah, that was an exciting run that they had. That was the year after I had not been the regular guy there, and the fact that they wound up having that run that went all the way through to Los Angeles and had the potential of coming back to New Jersey for a 7th game, but did not, will stay with me for a long time for sure.
Well, Doc, we really appreciate and thank you for coming on to the Let's Go Devils podcast. But before we let you go, I had one last question about the morning skates that you attended at South Mountain and at Prudential Center. I'm sure along the way, to these morning skates, I'm sure that you probably stopped by at a deli and picked up maybe a beverage and a breakfast sandwich. Could you answer this question and just settle it for all? Did you ever pick up a Taylor ham, egg and cheese, or a pork roll, egg and cheese?
Boy, you guys are pretty thorough in your research. Yeah, it strikes me that I probably did, and I'm trying to remember exactly where. There were a number of years that I was. You know a lot more than I do. You remember a lot more back through those years than I do, because there were a number of years that I would come to the morning skate and stop off at a deli. What do you know? Do you know the name of it?
No, I don't. I'm trying to figure out, because a lot of our Devils fans are debating whether it's called Taylor ham or pork roll. But no, I don't have a deli across South Mountain Arena or
probably 10 to 12 of the last years that I was doing Devils games, I was at the Embassy Suites in Secaucus, and they include a breakfast. And even at that time, there were a number of teams that stayed there, Buffalo and Pittsburgh and Colorado, and so I would oftentimes see the players, and that's the good thing about hockey players. They weren't off in a room by themselves. They were down with the rest of the general public having breakfast with everybody else in the morning. And it was always a very cordial time, and I always enjoyed those years when teams were playing at the Meadowlands, and they were often staying very close to the Meadowlands and in that hotel there. But no, you probably have me on something. I thought maybe you guys knew somebody that was an employee, and I was stopping regularly at a place because have a break, and if you find a place that you usually wind up making that a regular routine. So back before the Embassy Suite days, there probably was a place that I would stop.
Okay. Yeah, Well, Doc, thank you very much for coming on to the Let's Go Devils podcast. We really appreciate it, and we hope you come on sometime soon in the near future.
Well, I appreciate you guys having the positive spin that you do on being a fan of the team, because with every team, there are good years and bad years, and we are all trusting that this will be a good year because it sure started that way. And who knows, it may change as early as tomorrow night in Pittsburgh. But I appreciate the invitation that you extended to me and how well you have conducted all of this. And I'm sorry it has to come to a close, but maybe another time.
Yes. Thank you, Doc. And also look out for our Let's Go Devils podcast care package that we're going to send you and your wife after the show. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Doc.
Take care.
That is the infamous, legendary broadcaster, Doc Emrick. Guys, that was
cool.
That's all I can say. I think he avoided that last question there. I couldn't help myself. I'm really sorry.
Out of all the things that you're going to ask, I was like, I wonder if he's going to ask, like, do you miss being the Devils broadcaster? Do you remember the craziest thing that Chico ever ate? Pork roll.
Pork roll to eat.
I love how he just diplomatically just wordsmith his way out of that question. That is why he is so legendary, because I was caught off guard and I just like that awkward silence. I had nothing. I had nothing. I didn't know what to do. And you know what? That is Doc Emrick. That's why we love him. And I just want to ask everybody on the Facebook Live, did you enjoy that interview? Did you like what Doc was saying? I mean, there were so many things I wanted to ask him, but we hit 10 o'clock. We were up against the hour, and guys, I'm just
gotta have him on again.
Yeah, I know.
That would be great to have him on again. I mean, I came up with 10 questions beforehand, like we were talking earlier, and I only got through 3 of them. So I've got an arsenal of questions to continue to ask him. And I'm going to be honest, the stories, I could have listened to them all night.
I mean, my face hurts right now because I was smiling the whole time, and I still am. But I mean, it's just, like you said, like I have 1,000 questions that I could ask. I just, he's seen everything. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's at the point now where I don't even know. I'm like at a loss of words. That was incredible.
Guys, I got a nice comment from John Barrasso. It's Taylor Ham. It's Taylor Ham, and that was the toughest question you asked. LOL. But the other thing too was when you brought up that Pittsburgh Penguins game and a Brodeur lookalike, I actually had to think, who the.
I was waiting for you to say something, Sam. I was waiting for you to say.
Why didn't you tell him that that was me? Why didn't you say when he was like that was those crazy fans? I was like, I was so hoping that you would chime in and be like, by the way, that was me.
Professional. Well,
I know.
Well, I didn't want him just to hang up, after he heard like, oh, gosh, I got Marty Stalker and I'm on his podcast. I gotta save my reputation here. Out of 46 years, I'm on Marty Stalker's podcast. You know?
Yeah. You know what though? Like honestly, I know we should probably talk about the finish up with our conversation before about the current state of the team. But like, you know, when Doc came on and he was kind of saying like about being positive about the team, I don't know anybody that was listening tonight that can walk away and be like, man, I'm still a curmudgeon and I still want to, you know, I'm going to yell at the Devils. And you know what, that made me feel so positive, like about the current status of the team. It is early in the season. They have a couple of guys that they're trying out. And I really, really, really hope that Joey Anderson stays and sticks with the team, because I have a lot of, I don't know, high hopes for him, maybe more so than Mikey McLeod. Although that call-up hasn't happened yet. And when it does, oh, man. Oh, man.
Beer Baron is going live by himself.
That's right.
Mikey McLeod.
with the opening statement of, I told you so.
Pointing at the screen just like that, too. No, I mean, like, I got to say, like, his whole vibe was just positivity, which is great, which and, you know, he nailed it. You know, that's what we try to do with this podcast. And Doc nailed it, which was so cool.
Yeah.
Which is so awesome, because honestly, subconsciously, we grew up with Doc Emrick. We talked about the generation. We're the first line generation. That's all we know is New Jersey Devils hockey. We weren't a convert from Rangers, Flyers, Islanders. And for him to say that, we really do subconsciously emulate Doc Emrick on the Let's Go Devils podcast, because everything he does is so professional and so right and so genuine, and he's a hard worker. We work very hard, believe it or not, behind the scenes, like during the week and all the preparations that nobody sees. But we do this because we follow our passion, and we love the fans and the new friends that, you know, we have made through the podcast. I mean, there's a lot of other people just like us, and it means a lot. And just to have Doc Emrick, you know, on the podcast, sharing it with everybody and Facebook Live and YouTube, Periscope, and it's just we tried our best to bring you guys to the conversation. It's quite an honor, and you know, and I can't wait to, you know, send Doc an email, thank you, and this and that, because I think he thoroughly enjoyed being on this podcast, talking about his old team.
You know, my brother. I'm sorry, but I was going to say my brother brought up a great point. He goes, "How are you guys not doing the Chris Farley SNL skit, like the total fanboy, where you're like, God, you know, like getting frustrated?" Honestly, there was points where I was like, you know, when he was talking, I would get lost in his story and just be like, "Holy crap!" Like we're talking to Doc Emrick right now, and it's incredible. Like it's really cool to see like the, you know, who we've gotten to meet and talk to on this podcast, and getting to share it with all of you guys out there. And Rob, I was so happy that I was able to ask your question. I don't know. This is amazing.
Hey guys, I have a picture that kind of describes us talking to Doc during the show. It's kind of a cartoon. I'm just gonna, you know, put that up. I was going crazy. I mean, this is what we look like, you know, deep down inside. Sorry, I just had to add that in there. And you know, if you guys really like the podcast and all, you know, you could go to our Facebook page. You know, buy a T-shirt, support the show, because one day we'd like to travel to Michigan to see Doc and his wife Joyce on our Let's Go Devils podcast private jet. All proceeds of the T-shirts will go to that $35 million jet to see Doc Emrick. But you could go to our Facebook page / Let's Go Devils podcast. Sorry, I just had to, you know, sneak in a couple plugs before we head out.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I heard you got an announcement.
Oh yeah. Guy. Well, along with those T-shirts coming soon, hopefully this week, we'll post up the pre-order for these for the hoodies. I'm wearing one of them right now. So we'll have hoodies available to our listeners if they would like, and they're really awesome quality hoodies too. So look out for hoodies coming, and a new shirt design soon coming out soon as well.
It's made in New Jersey by Devils fans for Devils fans. Would you say?
Oh, agreed. Yes, totally.
I mean, this is not like fake stuff overseas. I mean, this is somewhere in New Jersey. We're making these hoodies and T-shirts, and they're very high quality. And Shorts Guy stands by his work.
Yeah. And so look for that post about a pre-order for some hoodies coming up sometime this week, possibly as early as tomorrow. So you're just gonna have to pay attention and look out for that.
Yeah, I'm pretty nice that Rob wore his shirt, his Let's Go Devils shirt, to meet Taylor Hall. So that was pretty cool. Too. That was a pretty cool picture.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Rob. We appreciate it.
Hey, Shorts Guy, somebody wanted to know, are there hats in the work?
There could be. I hadn't thought about it yet. I'm kind of starting just going with shirts and hoodies, but there could be hats.
Are there any ties in the work, Shorts Guy?
There could be. We can get you a tie made up, Sam. Sure.
How come I'm the only one that had it dressed professional today on the podcast? I don't know.
Well,
because you are the professional out of the three of us.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure. That's the truth.
Oh man, I don't. You know what? That was just such a cool interview. I'm very happy that we did it. It's just such a cool experience. So grateful for it.
Hey, and next week we'll talk a little bit more about the team. Hopefully they rebound from this little skid that they've been on. Let's see who they're going to bring up. I know a couple people were asking why they would bring up Gabriel and some of the questionable things of some of the people they put in the lineup. Let's hope they get into a groove again, pull off a good 4-game stretch. And Steven Santini, from what I understand, is a couple weeks away still with that broken jaw. But Jasper Brett should be in the lineup very soon.
You know what? May as well try everyone out right now because they got nothing else to lose right now to try new players. You never know. Bring the one guy in, creates a spark.
And you never know what that crazy Ray Shiro might do.
Yeah. You're hoping it's Mikey McLeod.
Well, yeah, I'm hoping he doesn't trade him away. You know what I mean? Like, I hope that he brings him up and he's not like, hey, we sent him to Ottawa. Like, what the?
Yeah.
Well, we'd just like to close out the show. Thanks to Doc Emrick for coming on to the Let's Go Devils podcast. We want to thank all the viewers and listeners for tuning in on the Let's Go Devils podcast. You can find the podcast before your morning drive tomorrow on iTunes, Spotify, and on the iHeartRadio app. And we'll be back next week at 9 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Till next time, let's go Devils.